session, 6 presentations, you know the procedure, 50 minutes each. Iris, 15, yes, questions in the end. I'm the chair, but also the doorman, so if time's up and the party's over, I'm going to throw you out. I'm going to do it in a decent way, obviously. So, Iris, you're going to get the first presentations. We got 4 presentations booked, but 2 presenters are still missing, so we hope we'll come in. But the last 2, so floor is yours. Go ahead.
Thank you very much, Ruben. Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here and present some of the work that PhD student Audrey Bascoul has been working on. This is actually descriptive research. She was very interested in the delivery of what we call high-end facilities, which are complex buildings, laboratories, healthcare facilities, and the like, and they obviously come with very strict requirements on performance, and the question is then, how do we understand these requirements on performance and how do we bring them into the project delivery process? So to start, what are the roots of what we call facilities management? It's actually a relatively old concept. It goes back, some people trace it back to the work of the nurse Florence Nightingale, who realized in hospitals that patients, if they were turned on one side of the bed, facing a wall, that in the course of a day they would automatically turn around and face the window. So she would always find them facing the window, and it made her think about to what extent that window really mattered in how their well-being was. So this is one of the early indications, as we all know, that building design really affects the behavior of people. And I think we've come to recognize nowadays that indeed facilities to a large extent are, in a way, machines that determine how well we can produce whatever we do inside. And so it's really important to think then about how we manage those facilities and operate them. Facilities management by name actually emerged in the industry in the 1970s, sort of as an evolution of, for one thing, increasingly complex workplace environments with more information technologies and increased air conditioning systems and so forth, and combined with this understanding that facility design really affects the behaviors of people in buildings. In the 1980s, there was a movement within the design community which is called evidence-based design, which has really made designers be much more explicit about the fact that their buildings have an impact on how people behave, and perhaps we can observe how people behave and from that extract how we should design those buildings. So I think these are all very much rooted, connected with each other, and in that sense, from a lean perspective, it's really important to look at this broader picture and see how we can enable better performance, in this case, to better facilities management. So what is facilities management? There seem to be infinitely many definitions out there about building systems, equipment, and furniture. We like the one that talks about services and support infrastructure and says, facility management is creating an environment that's conducive to the organization's primary processes and activities, taking an integrated view of its services and support infrastructure and using them to achieve end-user satisfaction and best value through support for and enhancement of the core business. Is there value in integrating facilities management in the project delivery process? Again, there's a lot of literature out there that says there is value, and there are different ways of integrating facilities managers. So obviously, facility management, because they are inside a building and they have to work inside a building, facility managers themselves are a user group. And so to the extent that designers interview user groups to understand how the building will be used, facility managers obviously are a part of that user group. In addition, of course, facilities managers tend to have also historic information and know how users in the past have responded to certain building settings, and so they can give feedback. In the design phase, obviously facilities managers can give information about maintenance, about building efficiency. They can perhaps avoid negative design iteration. Designers may make some choices that in the end will not work, and the facilities managers, if they're on board early enough, can help give feedback about what might have worked in the past and what will work in the current conditions. And one can argue that they also can translate user needs quite well because they've seen it from the operational perspective. In the planning phase, especially when it concerns facility upgrades, I think it's absolutely crucial that facilities managers be involved because facility upgrades tie into existing infrastructure. And so you really need to understand how that existing infrastructure is going to be disturbed by the new work and to what extent then the existing infrastructure can support the new work being done. Facilities managers also can have some input on construction sequencing means and methods because they can have insights into access path to the facility and so forth. And then last, in the construction phase, obviously there is value there, although oftentimes facilities managers one thinks that the design is completed and therefore facilities managers should no longer be in the picture, but one can say that facilities managers can serve as a liaison between the building users and the choices that are made in the course of construction. So they can help with making sure that the choices that were made in design and programming get translated, that the construction team understands them. And they can also offer input. There are always so many changes in construction, so many last-minute variations that get introduced, unfortunately, oftentimes at the expense of some longer-term facility management opportunities. And so having facilities management involved in those decisions can help. With all that said, Audrey looked at UCSF, UC San Francisco, university campus, part of the University of California system, and did some case studies to understand how this owner organization actually over time has been changing their involvement of its facilities managers into various parts of project delivery. And to talk about a framework for doing that, I wanted to come back to what we've been calling the lean project delivery system as a way of describing the different steps in delivering a project. So up front, we have project definition, the articulation of purpose, constraints that will lead to design concepts. There will be iteration in this first triangle that will translate into lean design, translate into lean supply, translate into lean assembly, and ultimately translate in use. So we see that there are 5 different triangles here. Audrey has taken the 5 different projects that we looked at from UCSF over the course of delivery between 2000 and today. And we have used these triangles as a way of depicting at what stage in the delivery process facilities managers were involved. And so that's what you see in this figure from our paper. The gray rectangle shows facilities management was involved in this later triangle, but was not involved in the earlier ones. And over time, UCSF has become to appreciate that it makes sense to involve facilities managers more and more and more, and perhaps all the way through project delivery. So those are the 5 different projects that we'll talk about. So the first project is called Genentech Hall. It was built in 1993, completed in 2003. I should mention all these buildings are all complex laboratory buildings, also with classroom settings, oftentimes with very complex state-of-the-art equipment. UCSF, I didn't mention it, but of the 10 campuses at the University of California system, UCSF has really the prime healthcare facilities campus. So there's a lot of medical doctors. My university across the bay, UC Berkeley, for example, does not have a medical school. So UCSF is very much focused on medical research, cancer research, and so on. So very complex buildings. 1999, 2003, it's an interesting time period. UCSF actually had the opportunity to relocate many of its facilities to south of Market, as we call it, in Mission Bay area of San Francisco. And Genentech Hall was the first building that they actually got to build there. It's a 161 million building, 5 stories, and it was delivered in relatively traditional ways. Just to give you one example, facility management was really not involved in design at all. For example, they didn't even have a say in how much janitor space they would need. The designers decided that for them. Okay. Second facility is the Helen Diller Family Cancer Center, delivered in 2006-2009. By that point, UCSF had discovered that they really needed to begin to deliver their projects in a lean way, that the traditional way of project delivery wasn't working. In fact, Michael Bade, who's been spearheading this effort of lean delivery on projects at UCSF, when he first joined UCSF, he spent just about all his time in lawsuits. And he said, this is not why I became an architect. I became an architect to build beautiful buildings, and let's figure out how to do that. And he's been really quite revolutionary in his approaches. So UCSF starts a lean journey, still relatively limited facility management involvement in project delivery, even though they begin to look at different ways of delivering the project and writing the contracts, the commercial terms, and therefore opening up an opportunity to bring facility managers in. The third project is the Smith Cardiovascular Research Building 2008-2010. This is really a landmark. It's the first project where UCSF actually had a big room in OPA and brings all the different team players together. They recognize facilities management as a stakeholder, and they actually involve them in design. Next project is what's called Mission Hall. This is mainly a classroom and office building that serves the UCSF Medical Center across the street. At this point, UCSF began to realize that if they involved facilities managers in design, what is it that these facilities managers would say, and what is it that other users might like to say in the course of design? And very smartly and very forward-looking, they developed what's called a technical performance criteria book. So they thought, if we want designers to design, we want to be able to determine whether they've designed something that we want, and therefore we need to specify up front what it is we want. And this has taken an enormous effort to do. Michael Bade also actually went back to the California state government and changed legislation. Up until then, he had to competitively bid every project. He couldn't really do truly integrated project delivery. He still cannot do truly integrated project delivery because of regulatory issues, but he set up a system which is called best value selection. And so the technical performance criteria handbook helps with that best value selection. He can now do a design build type of a project, give the performance handbook to all the potential candidates, and then have them design. And then based on the handbook, he can actually select which design best meets the value that's being proposed in the criteria handbook. Thank you. Unfortunately, on this project, it turns out, yes, facility management was involved, but they were involved only after the project was awarded to the design team. And this design team went out and actually did very creative things, but without really involving facilities management. So one of the things is they, as opposed to having overhead air conditioning systems in the room, they put it under the floor. There's a raised floor system. And facility managers had never seen that before, and so when the building started operation, they really didn't know how to operate it. And so it caused some time to actually commission and get that system to function. The next project, the last project, is one that's currently under construction, it's come out of the ground, and here what's worthwhile saying is UCSF now has its second version of their performance handbook, and in fact, facilities management has had really direct input into that performance handbook to determine what UCSF should be asking for of the design teams that they're working with. Okay, so conclusions. The literature, is very clear, and I think many people will easily agree that it's necessary to involve facilities management into the delivery process so that they can help articulate what value in use is. But UCSF, even though they now have facility management involved up front, they still have many, many questions as to how to exactly do that. To give you just a few examples of their questions, they are a huge campus, many, many different buildings, which means many different facilities managers, and guess what? Facilities managers among themselves don't necessarily agree as to what the best practices are, right? And so they need to put their heads together and somehow standardize across the board for the whole campus what they want to do. I think the other challenge as highlighted with the last example of the raised floor is that the world is changing, and even if facility managers have a lot of experience with operating existing systems, tomorrow's systems are different. So many questions underway. Thank you for taking an extra minute.